following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
I am back, as promised, going to talk to one of the most interesting people on the planet. How do I know? Steve Joyner told me so. Lee Paul, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm talking from the land of the sunburned teeth here in Southern California.
Okay. You're not originally from Southern California, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I'm from Brooklyn. You got a problem with that?
I'm from Queens. Yo, hey.
That reminds me of the story when I set up pins for a little while when I was a youngster, and my father yanked me out of the bowling alley. He said, "If you want your legs broken, I'll break them." But I remember very much that when you went over the head pin on trying to get a strike, it was called and you got a strike. It was called a jersey because you went over the head pin on the wrong side.
The side, right?
That was called a jersey strike. I remember that from 600 years ago.
All right. Where did you go to school in Brooklyn?
Well, I went to the garbage can of the school system, PS 8, which was public school number 8, right under the Brooklyn Bridge. And I have these stories, as you well know. I was the first and maybe the only young child ever to be accepted at Bronx High School of Science and Brooklyn Tech in Brooklyn, because those were public schools that required an entrance exam to get in. And I wound up going to Brooklyn Tech after PS8.
Well, let me tell you something. The high school I went to, Newtown High School in Queens, didn't even require an exam to get out of the school. let alone to get in. So there were 3 schools in New York, if I recall, because I'm a native, you're a native, both living in California, but you never forget. 3 schools that distinguished the average student from the really superior student. Brooklyn Tech was one, Stuyvesant was another one, and Bronx High School of Science was the 3rd.
Right. So, I was accepted there, too, as I remember.
Okay. You were quite an extraordinary young chap. What did you do with all that education from New York City?
Well, you might think that I started as a wunderkind and wound up in the intellectual toilet, but the point is that I had great promise as a youth, and because of everybody either succumbs or survives in New York. You know that. I was a pusher. I was tall. For my age, I'm still tall. For my age, I'm almost 5'5" now. I started to shrink. But in those days, you had to find yourself a niche in order to survive. And I wound up going to Brooklyn Tech early, graduating early, and then going to college on a scholarship in Ohio early, and graduating just before my 20th birthday with 2 degrees from Marietta College in Marietta, Ohio. So, but I wound up in show business, and some people would think maybe that isn't the highest level of accomplishment one can acquire. But there's many stories in between.
I think it is, my friend. Being a comedian myself, I may be prejudiced, but I admire what you do. Anybody who could put themselves out there in any way and have a passion for it has my admiration.
Well, anyone who can find out what he wants to do in his life is blessed. And then if you have the talent to do it, you're doubly blessed. And then if you succeed in any way, you're triply blessed. There's no question about that.
Okay. I want to ask you, in getting to know you, what did you read as a kid?
Science fiction, I remember Heinlein, The Red Planet, and a bunch of science fiction, and I also was enamored with magic. So magic and science fiction were my early reads, and there's an interesting story about how the magic got me involved with someone, but I don't know, how much outside of my own sphere you want to go.
Magic and that, I'm surprised you didn't get into organized religion in any way.
Well, no. I wound up in one of the reasons I was excelling in school early on is that I took a year or so in a Catholic school, and they were unfortunately better than the public schools. And I wound up I wasn't really convinced that I was a Catholic, but I wound up as an altar boy. And I remember, and this is not to deride the people who believe and have faith in religion and in Catholicism, but I remember being an altar boy and serving 3 or 4 tall tumblers of wine per Mass with no water. And I said to myself, I'm in the wrong business. I should be growing this stuff.
That's great. What did you take away from the Catholic Church that was good?
Well, I wish I had the faith that people today have. Religions in general say, do unto others as you should do unto yourself, and treat others as you'd like to be treated. Unfortunately, Ralph, we know that more damage has been done to humanity in the guise of religion than all the wars put together. My God is better than your God, so
that's why I asked the question. I'm always looking for what people derive out of organized religion, especially Catholicism. I think that's incredibly a good example of what you just said. But
Catholicism is a great religion, but it's not the only religion. There are a lot of great religions in the world, and people who follow the tenets, even the Quran, in its purity, are not killing other people because they believe their God is better than the other person's God. They say, don't talk, what did W.C. Fields say, don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, and don't talk to babies. The bottom line is it's a very difficult, touchy subject, and people get very emotional about it. But even today, last couple of days, we see Ireland is starting to boil over again. This idea that one God is better than the other is absolute insanity. And if we could only took the great tenets of the great religions and apply them to everybody and ourselves, live and let live, everybody cooperate and do the best for themselves and for humanity, we'd have a far better world.
Well, if you start by taxing organized religion, there will come a time where you can just compare it with astrology, and people will just think it's if it wasn't a business, it would go away. Let's put it that way.
Well, if you know your history, in the Middle Ages, the people with money could pay the Catholic Church money guaranteeing that they would go to heaven. The point is, and of course, there's the idea of heaven and hell. But I believe that religion in its best vein is a wonderful thing. And faith is a wonderful thing. Belief is a wonderful thing. But in its uglier side, it can be a destructive force among humanity. And I'm disquieted by what's happening in the world anyway. But religion, certainly, the extremes of the religious cults have really done great damage to the human spirit.
Your words bring the song of Peter, Paul, and Mary to mind. If religion were a thing that people could buy, the rich would live and the poor would die. And So, well spoken.
Well, they're doing that without the song, but that's very interesting. I never remembered that phrase. I do remember growing up in Brooklyn, and that's where the magic comes in. Do you remember the Weavers, Goodnight Irene and Wimaway?
Oh, it's Pete Seeger, and they played at Carnegie Hall. One of my favorite albums of all time is The Weavers at Carnegie Hall, and they were absolutely terrific.
Well, here's the story that how I got tied up in that. Lee Hayes was the bass. He lived in the third floor of Earl Robinson's house in Columbia Heights, which wasn't far from PS8. Earl Robinson wrote a number of very, very prominent folk and union-oriented tunes, and I used to go to their house because Earl Robinson's son and I used to do magic tricks together. Now,
oh, wow.
Now, and I would run into Mr. Hayes as you come down the stairs, and which brings a whole other story, and I don't know how much of a give and take you'd like of this little interview, but this brings up a terrific story because we would go to hootenannies in those days. You remember that term, I'm sure.
I sure do.
And we'd go there, and I would go, and they passed around, flyers and stuff like that. I'm young. I'm 10, 11, young. And we'd sign stuff. And what happened was, many years later, this is really a jump. I'm at college in my senior year at Marietta College in Marietta, Ohio, and I get an announcement to go to the student union. Someone wants to see me. Now, they were how can I say, fighting against the war that was going on. I guess it was Vietnam.
Protest, that little thing?
Yeah, that little thing. And what happens, I didn't join them. Anyway, a guy comes into the student union wearing trench coat and sunglasses in the middle of December in Ohio. It's freezing, and he comes in with his sunglasses, and he comes to the table and says, "Are you Paul Kroll?" Which was my legal name. My name is Paul Lee Kroll, but I became Lee Paul, and that's another big story, but we won't go into that. Anyway, he sits down and says, "We understand that you have some friends in New York we'd like to know more about." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, the Weavers and Earl Robinson and stuff." I said, "How do you know about this stuff?" He said, "We know everything about you. In fact, we know you're a communist." And I said,
"Oh, wow."
I said, "Are you crazy?" I'm a smart-ass kid from Brooklyn at 19, graduating number one in his class in petroleum engineering, and this turkey with sunglasses playing CIA or FBI is telling me this stuff. And I said, "Give me a break, will you? You see me organizing those rabble-rousers there in the union trying to fight the war? I don't give a damn about politics or war." He says, "Well, what do you give a damn about?" I said, "What's it to you?" He said, "I'll tell you what's it to me. You play ball with me, go back to New York and spy on your friends, and we'll give you anything you want." I said, "Are you nuts?" And he slides his badge out, and as he does that, I see he's carrying a sidearm. Now, I'm a smartass, but now I'm getting a little nervous. Anyway, long story short, he comes up with this premise because he has papers that I signed as a 12-year-old saying, I believe in the overthrow of the government, whatever it was. I mean, socialism, communism is socialism today at worst, but the point is they were trying to say that I was a commie and they'd get me off the books and they'd give me what I want. And off the top of my head said, I know what I want. I want to be a star on Broadway. And he said, well, I don't know if you'll be a star, but you play ball with us and we'll put you on Broadway. And I can I swear on this story? Everybody's swearing even today on the news. I said, go F yourself. You're full of shit. And he said, we're watching you, and he left. That genesis, that entire episode, prompted me to write a screenplay called Bastard Pink, which is registered with the Guild and with the Writers Guild and copyrighted, which I'm trying to peddle. But it's the story of the young punk who says yes and goes back to New York to try to spy on his friends and play both his friends and the FBI and the mafia all against each other. And of course he loses. But that's a long way from PSA and college, but that's that story anyway.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. I'm sure you're familiar with Woody Allen's The Front.
Yes, of course.
Did that come to mind when, did your experiences come to mind when that movie came out?
No, not really, and I'll tell you why. I'm an actor. I'm looking for contemporary work, as all us are, even though I'm now in the grandfather age range, 60 to 71. I always like that. Well, but the point is that I'm a lover of Turner classic movies. I'm still in the 40s and the 50s, film noir. I can't stand watching films that are made in the last 20 years that I'm not in, because I see parts that I should have been up for and never heard about. So it's tough. So I never saw The Front. Of course, I heard about it. I've heard about Woody Allen. I'm sure Woody Allen hasn't heard about me. But the truth is that my love of film is still in the black and white era. And though I've done, The Sting, which was a monumental film, and certainly one of the highlights of my career, though my career really sums up to 700 bodyguards. Big guys are bad guys. And if you're a big guy, you're a bad guy. And I've spent most of my active career of 30-plus years trying to broaden my range as an actor. Not just, can I get the boss, do other things. Which brings another story in which I'll stop because you're going to have a chance to take a breath and get involved. But the point is that that's the story about big guys and bad guys.
Okay. May I ask you this? How did you get into acting initially?
Well, we didn't talk much before this little interview, and I hope you have brought some lunch because
no, by design we didn't talk much by design.
Right.
I want my audience to get to know you at the same time that I do. So when you come back as a follow-up, we have a point of reference.
Well, here's the story about that. I'm at Brooklyn Tech. The last year of Brooklyn Tech, I had already taken all the courses of the first year of college. So when I got to Marietta College on a scholarship, I wound up skipping or getting through all the first year of everything because that's how advanced Brooklyn Tech was. But I got a scholarship in chemical engineering. Don't ask me why. But chemical engineering, I go to Ohio, and by the way, Marietta is right near Titusville, Pennsylvania, where they discovered the first discovery of oil in America. We can go to that story in a minute. Anyway, I'm in the labs doing all these tests, which I'd already done in high school. And I said, this is boring. Let me see what I can find out. And I found out that the petroleum engineering department went on field trips. And I said, hey, I can get out of the lab. So I transferred to the petroleum engineering department. Now, I'm walking around campus, and I'm a young 16-year-old, 6'5.5" juvenile. But I think I'm the big guy on campus because there were more people on my block than there were in the entire college. That's there were like 900 people, 900 in those days. There were all people living in my block. So here I am, and I'm chasing the women. I don't know what to do, but I'm chasing the women. So, I mean, it's in the genes. And I see this very good-looking girl, and I follow her around, and I find out that she's a singer, and she's going to be in one of the productions at Marietta College called Amal and the Night Visitor. That was by Menotti, and it's an operatic, mysterious play about a couple trying to reach their dead son through a medium. It's called Amal and the Night Visitors. Okay, the medium. So anyway,
okay.
I know the way I'm going to get close to this girl is to get in the play. So I go up to this little teacher. I mean, he could have been 5'1", 2, 3. And I go up to him and say, I'm going to be in your play. And he said, okay. Do you sing? I said, no. Well, he was the voice teacher. So he taught me enough vocal ability to do the one line in the play. Now, that's another story, but I won't go into that. So anyway, we're doing the play, and suddenly the lights are hitting me and the applause, and I'm saying to myself, hey, I like this. This is fun. And the girl who I'm chasing kind of steps in my spotlight, and I push her out of the way. And as I pushed her out of the way, there went the women, and there came show business, and that's how I got into show business. And so when I graduated from college with a very good job with Schlumberger Oil Well Surveying Corporation, which is still around, which is a big player worldwide today, I had this dream of becoming a performer, an actor, and I wound up being, I don't know if I can go on like this without you wanting to interrupt, but I wound up going to Williston.
I love your free flow of thought. Go.
I wound up going to Williston, North Dakota. Now, in the 60s, the only thing in Williston, North Dakota were cows and oil wells. Today, they have oil shale, and there's a great resurgence of the oil business in Williston now. But when I was there, it was bleak, barren, 19 below zero in the winter, and I was in this little shed all by myself doing nuclear tests of the strata for permeability and porosity of these layers, seeing whether the oil wells, if drilled down there, would produce oil, which was at $4 or $5 a barrel. That's what it was in those days. In fact, it was less. I think they said it would never go to $5. Of course, it went over to $100, and then we're getting back there again. Anyway,
that cocaine was free, so we got to put it all into perspective.
So the story quickly is that I get called after a couple of months. I'm miserable. All we're doing is ordering hi-fi equipment from Chicago, which we never even set up. There's nothing to do, and I get called into the office of Schlumberger, and they say, Mr. Kroll, we got a problem. And I said, okay, what is it? He said, you're too funny. I said, what do you mean? He says, you're telling better jokes than the guys in the oil patch. I said, so? He said, they're the jokesters. They own the land. They're the funny men. You have to laugh at their jokes. You can't tell them jokes funnier than them. I said, oh, my God, I don't think this is going to work out.
With your boss.
I said, I don't think this is going to work out. You know what they said? We don't think it's going to work out either. But we appreciate your humor and your entertaining ability. And they gave me a Broadway or bust party. And I left Williston, North Dakota, and wound up back in New York. And that's as far as I'll go with this story. But pursuing a theatrical career.
Well, I'd love to talk to you all day. In the interest of time, though, I want you to tell me what you got going on now and what you're up for, what you're rehearsing for, what your hopes and aspirations are.
That's a painful subject, Ralph. Number one, I'm trying to bring back a career after 100 television shows and 25 or 30 years of on-camera work. 30 years after the fact. I haven't been in front of a camera except for the Jeff and Janke show on YouTube with a 2-hour on-camera interview just a couple of weeks ago. I haven't been in front of a camera as a paid performer in 30 years. So when you ask me, what am I looking for, or what am I doing? What I'm doing are these very interesting and hopefully entertaining phone interviews. I got a new agent. Am I allowed to say the agent's name?
Absolutely.
Okay, the agency is called the Brogan Agency, BROGAN, 312-502-4653. I got a new demo. I got some new pictures showing my new age range, which I said 60 to 71, and I'm trying to bring back a career that has laid dormant in a 30-year hiatus. That's really tough to do because, you know, the older you are, the less roles there are. But luckily, the older you are, the less people or less actors there are alive. They die. So I'm alive. I'm going to be 80 in June 16th. But luckily, I've always photographed 10 to 15 years younger than I actually am. And so what I'm looking for is anybody out there that has a union gig that I might be right for.
Beautiful. And would you come back and tell us how you're doing from time to time? Because
absolutely,
you are, as Steve Joyner, the publicist extraordinaire, says, you are amongst the most interesting people around. So,
well, you know, at age, my father gave me three things. He gave me pig eyes, a double chin, and a gift of gab. My father was a raconteur and a salesman all his life, and I learned to talk by listening to his stories. In fact, a lot of his stories are in my book. And let me just mention that quickly. I wrote a book called Bitch, Pitch, and Get Rich. It's called Success at the Tip of Your Tongue. It's about standing on your feet, speaking up loudly about what you believe in, getting involved with life. Because if you bitch, you owe yourself to pitch a better idea, not just bitch and stand around. So you pitch a better idea and you can get involved with life. Even if your new idea is not good, it doesn't work, you'll be involved with the richness of the experience of life around you. And it's on Amazon. You can read a free chapter. And if you like it, you can buy the paperback for $9. Bitch, Pitch, and Get Rich by Lee Paul.
Wow. What you say is very true. It is the journey that's important, not necessarily the destination.
Absolutely. You should read it, to check it out, Ralph, because we think alike. Maybe it's just our generation, but we do think alike.
We do, and I want you to remember, too, more important than the journey is the oasis. Think about
Explain that to me.
Well, you know, my grandfather told me when you tell a joke or you tell a story and you have to explain it, it's a lousy story. So forgive me for telling you a lousy story. But the journey, the destination, and the oasis. The oasis is needed as much as the destination.
Well, that's what I'm a little trouble understanding. What do you mean by oasis? A place of rest, a place to rejuvenate? Is that what you're talking about?
An oasis on a journey. What is an oasis on a journey?
An interim destination, a place on the way to the end? I guess it varies.
An interim, a time to reflect, a time to just kick back, enjoy the oasis.
Well, I can sum this up by saying I've been kicking back for 30 years. It's time to get back on the quest.
I see you're 30 and raise you 31 more.
Wow.
Lee, you're terrific. Please come back, remain comfortably zoned, and promise to keep up with you. You're terrific.
All right. Thank you for the time, and I hope your audience was entertained a little bit.
Absolutely. I was entertained. That's what counts.
Terrific. Tell Phil Joyner. He'll be glad to hear it.
I will. Be well, my friend, and thank you for listening, everybody. It's the Comfortably Zoned Network. We are on TLB TV.com. And special thanks to Luca Marjan, who's the technical guy on the Comfortably Zoned contribution to TLB TV. And he does a terrific job. Adios, everybody. We'll see you down the line. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.